All right, it's just past 2 p.m., so we're going to get started here. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, How to Streamline Customer Data Collection Anytime, Anywhere. Thank you for joining us. My name is Arlene Galton and I'm from FormHero. I'll be your host today. Before I turn this over to our two excellent speakers, allow me to spend a quick minute going over some session logistics. Firstly, we have a lot of information to share with you today. Don't worry, we are recording the webinar and we'll be sharing it in the slide deck along after this event. So if you do need to leave early or study a particular slide in more detail, you'll be able to see the replay later on. Second, we have time allocated at the end for questions. Please ask questions throughout this presentation using the Q&A button located at the bottom center of your screen. We'll hold questions until the end and get through as many as we can. We'll answer any questions that we didn't get to in a blog post, which we'll send to you at the very end of the event. And finally, while we're all familiar with Zoom by now, just a reminder that if you are having trouble reading some of the slides, that you can make this presentation full screen by clicking on the upper right button of your screen. All right, so let's get into it. Our speakers today have decades of experience in helping customers collect good data. Art Harrison is co-founder and chief growth officer of FormHero, where he focuses on ensuring happy customers. Marty Pavlik, who will be kicking us off today, is practice lead at Doculas and has put in complex digital business transformation initiatives for many Fortune 500 companies. And with that, it's over to you, Marty.
Thanks for the introduction, Arlene. Super excited to be able to co-present with Art. He's a gentleman with a lot of industry experience, somebody I bounce a lot of ideas off of and come to a lot of different solutions. In fact, I asked him if I should wear a sport coat today, and he said I should. So thanks, Art. I had to dust this off. I think it's the first time I wore a sport coat since COVID.
Yeah.
But with that said, we have a jam-packed agenda for you today. We're going to start by covering the common problems and pain points of forms. We're going to go in through some industry examples. And finally, we'll end the webinar with how to approach forms modernization. So with that said, why don't we go ahead and get started and move on to the next slide. So in this section, we'll cover some of the common problems with forms. If you want, you can move to the next slide. Thank you. So forms today is still a very underappreciated area of many businesses. What you would find is that a lot of kind of first steps of a customer's experience is pretty digitalized. But once you move beyond that first step and actually getting to new processes like opening an account, money movement, things of that nature, you'll find that a lot of corporations are still lagging in their forms digitization. Even though the form digitization has a dramatic improvement on customer experience, operation cost, and overall streamlining content governance. So in today's presentation, what we want to show you is how you go from a potential current state you're in of a mixed match of forms to a more digitization experience like the TurboTax experience. If you could, please move to the next slide. So here are some of the common problems with forms and forms management. And I think one of the things, we even see today is change management issues. For example, one company implemented e-signatures at their company without telling their sales reps that they went from paper to digital. Salesperson calls up the company and says, I need to speak to E. Person on the line says, there's nobody named here E. Well, what about Mr. E? There's nobody named Mr. E here. Finally, he said, I need e-signature. That's just a little forms joke for you to start the presentation off. But, if you really think of some of these common problems, they're really being engaged from a different customer expectations. If you looked at our experience with Amazon and other e-commerce type companies, it's dramatically changing the expectations we all have on any institution you're doing business with. From the need for more personalization, more consistency from the experience, or more convenience, as well as a more immediate interaction with that organization we're doing business with. If you could, please move to the next slide. So Art, why don't you walk us through some of the common set of technology problems with forms?
Thanks, Marty. No, appreciate it, and thanks for kicking things off. And sorry I didn't wear a jacket as well. I got you on that one, but no, I think we're always excited to come and talk to organizations that are looking to make that move. It's a really important move. A lot of organizations have been talking about it for decades, literally. And we have great, there's great partners, and Doculabs is one of them, where people are building strategies of moving towards a digital solution. And as a technology vendor, we come in and there's a new set of challenges that arise because operationalizing change can also be a really difficult thing. When you think about taking what your current state is and moving towards digital, it's often not just a single entity or group or line of business that's trying to solve the problem. There's often competing solutions going in place. There's initiatives from customer experience groups, from digitization groups, individual lines of business. And when you combine that with all of the core systems that people are aspirational to have integrated into a straight through digital solution, and the complexity of some of the journeys, it really can add to a lot of scope creep. And that's what ends up paralyzing organizations. So finding ways to overcome that is really important so that you can achieve what you're looking for. We also, a big problem that we see is people want to go digital, but there's a lot of regulatory and other needs that mean that paper's not going away. So finding ways to still support the users that are paper because of a lack of access to technology, or because it still can be an effective way in some circumstances, is critical. The other two that we always like to talk about are the issues around info security and IT. When you start going from a paper form and saying, hey, we want to collect our customer data in the cloud at scale, it often drives people to the DIY route because they're limited, or they're risk adverse in terms of what they can do, and they don't always hit the same achievements that they were aiming for. And the final thing that we always say to people is, and I'm sure it's part of the same conversations you have, which is, if you look too much from the inside out, you may be able to solve it, or you may attempt to solve it, but you're often not going to solve it from the customer's perspective or the user's perspective. And thinking and shaping your mindset in the right way is really important. Next slide, please. A typical ecosystem, when we talk about all the challenges, it's made up of all kinds of technologies, whether they're legacy or new, investments in things like RPA, workflow management, e-signature that Marty was just talking about. There's a lot of ways to kind of hack at the solution. But if you don't take a consistent view of how are we going to orchestrate all of this technology, all of these experiences, and do it from the user's perspective, it's where you can get into a lot of trouble. Next slide. And this I just wanted to call out because I really do think from our perspective as a technology vendor, this is one of the most common things that we see, and something that we often are advising about mindset. It's kind of like when the world the world of the technology and enterprise world is trying to transition to an agile approach. It's in parallel with that. Organizations sit down and they say, we're going to build for the known. What do we know today? We're going to build a solution that's going to allow us to take everything digital. And what ends up happening is the first two lines of business or projects are the ones that pay the bill. And sometimes if they don't have the budget, it doesn't even go forward. But they, eventually something is built 18, 24 months later, and they try to apply it to all of their problems, but they realize that they missed edge cases. So it doesn't deliver what value they want. But on the flip side, next slide, when you take the outside in view and you say, I have a problem, I have a process. Marty was talking about account onboarding or account maintenance. I would have immediate value right now if I could provide my users a better way to do it. You can see ROI right away in days or weeks. And as you start solving these small problems, you're building a flow of data, flow of information where your technology teams, if they need to, can take them further and build targeted solutions to get to that ideal state of straight through processing. I think it's back to you, Marty.
All right, thanks for that. Very insightful. Now, when we consult with companies, we're finding that a lot of companies are still having trouble building out the business case for digitizing forms. And the primary reason for that is they take an inside-out approach. And what I mean by that is they'll start with operational benefits of ways to reduce costs, reduce call center volume, and then they'll go into some business benefits of really thinking reducing the NIGOs will help the customers, and maybe, even they might have had a fine, a regulatory fine that they have to address. And all those things are great, but when they come into problems is, particularly an IT department, if they're the ones initiating the project, is when they go across the different business units, they have a difficult time gaining that budget because really it's an outside-in approach, and there could be many other initiatives in the organization that have better ROIs. However, what we recommend is going from an outside-in approach and really start with the customer experience benefits first. And those are often hard to quantify, particularly when you're talking about paper-based forms and PDF forms, because you don't have that digital footprint of really what's going on with that customer experience. So we recommend going back to old customers that might have left you, or go to current existing customer and really understand what their experience is, quantify some cycle times and things of that nature. And we even go as far as have some of our consultants actually go through that experience to determine what the pitfalls are, and more importantly, what is the true value you're losing from a revenue standpoint by this poor experience. So we highly recommend going from an outside-in approach versus starting from an inside, from an operational standpoint. Can you please move to the next slide? All right, now we're getting to some fun stuff. We're going to go through some industry examples, and I think all of you will be able to relate to some of these slides coming up. If you could, please move to the next slide. So before getting into this slide, I want to remind everyone that expectations are changing. They're changing from personalization. People want more personalization. They want consistency. They want immediate interaction, and they want convenience. So think through that when you're looking at these forms on the screen. I'll walk you through some of the highlights that we see is, if you looked at this form, it looks pretty straightforward. There's minimum kind of legalities things down there, and it's pretty easy to fill out. However, I could tell you for myself is, if I had to fill out a form like this, and I'm at home, I have 3 small kids at home right now, to take time to fill out this form isn't really convenient to have to actually try to find somewhere to, email this to, or God forbid if you have to fax it in. It just doesn't have the convenience characteristics that a digital form has. As well as you have to really do some research. As you can tell, there's no email or fax option on this form. And you'd even have to do your own calculations. And since everything's pretty much automated nowadays, that could be a challenge for some of us. Please move to the next slide. So now this next slide, it's a little better average experience for the consumer using it to fill it out. However, you see some kind of standard information types here could be validated. Possible choices are clearly defined, and you even have some of those calculations. But now going back to that customer experience, if you think about it, if you're rolling over an IRA, for example, and you have an existing account at this brokerage, you would fully expect to have a more personalized experience. What I mean by that is you'd have some of this stuff pre-populated already as far as name information, address information, social security number, what type of investor you are. So it really fails that personalization test. Good, move to the next slide. So for this, just for the interest of time, I'll skip this slide. We want to at least put it in there for then everybody has access to it. And now we want to kind of get into the industry benchmark experience. Now, I'm not sure how many people have worked in TurboTax, and you probably, quite frankly, determine if it's a good experience or a bad experience if you're getting a refund or not. But if you look at it purely from a digital standpoint and in converting old PDF paper forms to, a digital form, this is by far one of the industry's best examples. And having a tax accounting background when I first initially started, I could assure you this is a godsend for a lot of tax accountants out there. It's a streamlined web application. It's, the usability and reliability of it is by far greater than any type of paper form you have to rely on. And more importantly, if you think about this, it replaced hundreds of IRS forms. Now, if you can replace 100 IRS forms with a web form, there's no form really that cannot be replaced, I think. You want to move to the next slide? All right, so going back to that benchmark, the new consumer expectations around personalization, consistency, immediate interaction and convenience. And I'll be saying that throughout this whole presentation. So you'll definitely be able to memorize those by the time I'm done. But if you look at the very top of where it's measuring your refund, progress is shown while the form is being completed. This is immediate interaction of knowing where your status is, and ultimately, what your refund should be, or hopefully it's not your tax paid or tax owed. Now getting into, it pre-populates some of the fields from prior year's information. So your client information could be auto-filled in, whether that's your previous years, your dependents. Also, it has OCR capabilities where if you took a picture of your W-2, it would immediately populate that. It's a very personalized experience. If you get into trouble and you do have a question, taxes are still pretty complicated. There's a support function at the very top right, which is very convenient and provides an immediate kind of response to somebody's more difficult questions. And then if you looked on the left, it has a very consistent menu that provides you an easy way to go back and forth between different forms without even knowing it. Move to the next slide, please. And again, for interest of time, we put this one in here too. Please review this one at your leisure. So now, Art, I'm going to ask you a question. Now, why don't you show everyone how you kind of go from the current state, difficult PDF forms and paper to digital experience?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think I think it's I think the TurboTax is a perfect example. The return on that and what it accomplishes is massive, but it's also daunting to a lot of organizations, right? TurboTax is backed by however many hundreds of millions of dollars, and they spend all day every day thinking about that form. But it doesn't have to be that difficult. That's where there's experts in the industries and there's people to lean on, technology advisors, consultants, strategists that can help you achieve similar results. The other thing I want to touch on, Marty, just because I think you mentioned it, is what you do. I know at Doculabs, where you have some of your associates go through the processes. The documents are fantastic. We've seen the same where we'll actually go into a bank, go into a client and ask the frontline workers, what do you do? And it turns out that oftentimes they're like, oh, this is what the document says, but what I do is I correct this here because we haven't updated that, but that's just how it works. And I think it's important to understand that you have all these processes. They're not just one-to-one, a paper form and a digital experience, as you said, with tax. It's a business process. You're trying to engage with the organization and pushing that off to the client with, you hit a self-serve portal and you come across all of these documents, all of these forms, and you're not sure, I'm married and I live in this jurisdiction. What's the right document for me? So our kind of goal, and as a vendor, is always, let's show them how quickly change can be made. So we took an example. This was just from a demo that we put together, and we often do these in a day or so. It's a change of beneficiary form, one of the most common insurance-based forms. I got married, I'd like to add someone to my account. So this is what you see as the end user. But if you go to the next slide, what we want to present to people always is, how do I go from that PDF or PDFs and turn that into that experience that touches on all the points that Marty was talking about, that shows progress, that shows that validates information, that adapts to what I'm saying to it, to only ask me relevant follow-up questions. Next slide. So the first thing that we always say is, from a technology perspective, you want to think about the problem from all the ways that customers are going to want to interact with it. So that outside in, again, that Marty and I have both been kind of speaking to, you're building a solution for a change of beneficiary form. People may be engaging with that from, they might be an employee assisting someone over the phone. It may be them from a desktop, a mobile device, an app. So ideally, you want to find a way to build solutions where people can engage wherever they are. Additionally, if you look at this particular form, when Julia is logged into this portal, this hypothetical Julia, the form adapts and changes. It's not going to welcome them to the process or, let's get started. It's going to jump right back in and say, welcome back, Julia. She might be resuming something, or she might, we already have 80% of what needs to be captured for her, but the same experience that's going to work in your unauthenticated channel, so directly from your public website, can be the same solution that powers your members' portals. And it just adapts based off of the context in which the person is engaging with it. Next slide. We didn't walk through the whole process because, again, Marty touched on a lot of the great points, but I wanted to pull out a couple of things that we see as really common themes across organizations that are looking to digitize. The first is in the top right, and there's a lot of different ways to solve for this. But you can go digital, but if you go digital and you're doing a complex commercial or business or insurance process, and you get 3/4 of the way through it and get stuck and you have to restart it the next time that you want to do it, that's a bad experience, no matter how good the form or the process was. So thinking about how you're going to manage save and resume, or when I get stuck and I want to call someone, how are they going to have access to what I've done up to this point? Another challenge that we actually see, and a lot of our, I think it probably ties into what you do, Marty, over at Doculabs is, people say, okay, I want to go digital, and I've always done wet signature. That was just the case. It was a paper form. We did wet. We know we want, hey, e-signature sounds great, but the cost on that can be problematic as well. So we're finding a lot of our clients are evaluating and kind of stack ranking or categorizing the processes that they're going for and saying, where do I need e-signature? Where do I need wet signature? And when can I an e-consent, where I'm capturing metadata around the experience and saying, this is the IP address, the time, the information. And our legal team, who you tend to engage early as you're building out a solution plan for this, says, yeah, this category of things can be, will accept e-consent, and we can get to an immediate action for the client instead of cost in more roundabout ways. It's not always the case, but it is a core consideration we often work with clients on. Next slide, or last slide on this section, I guess, for me, is, in this example, the user went through, hey, do you want to do a beneficiary? Is it a primary, a secondary? Are they under 18? And if so, you'll need a trustee. All of those, the fine print from a typical PDF form is just managed naturally. But in the case of this, the organization might not be ready to build an end-to-end digital solution. So they can still stand up the experience they want. And on day one, which may only be a week or two after initiating the project, maybe it's 8 weeks, still a short amount of time in enterprise, they're able to consume, have that the PDF document, as it were, delivered without any errors or any issues to the right place. And then when it comes time to build out a better solution or a straight through solution in the future, they're not changing the user experience. They're just augmenting it to automatically consume this document or send the data right to a book of record. Those are some of the key areas that we talk about. Obviously, there's more, but just as in addition to what Marty was covering, I thought I'd touch those. There we are.
All right, now the last part of the agenda: how to approach forms modernization. This is a very exciting section we put together. If you could move to the next slide, and we can jump right into it. So approaches to form modernization. What we've seen companies really struggle with is what is the right approach when you're modernizing hundreds, if not thousands of forms. We've seen companies take a siloed approach and really choose one piece of onboarding for one product. And we're really seeing those type of projects fail because it loses the ability to scale that solution across the enterprise. So what we recommend is only really a two-step process, believe it or not. And the first step is really reviewing your forms, getting them categorized into buckets, and then analyzing your inventory. From there, you'll be able to determine your prioritization. And some of it could be just by, identifying what forms are really obsolete. Develop, what forms really you need and what forms you don't need. But what's more important, though, is really identifying the value of that form. What's the transaction going through that's really the consumer is using for that form? So, for example, if IRA rollovers are your main project and it has a big marketing effort behind it and you have billions of dollars, that would be a high prioritized form, other than maybe some of the simple form like re-registration that happens less frequently and really doesn't have a large dollar value amount to it. So that's another way to evaluate what forms you want to go after first. But more importantly, you need to put that into some type of roadmap that works well with your IT department, your business department, and overall change management strategy. Once that's done, then you could start redesigning those forms for those new customers' expectations of personalization, consistency, immediate interaction, and convenience. So the second step now is, some of the stuff that FormHero does really well, and Art mentioned, is create a pure Q&A experience for your client, where it's a simple question answer and it gets pre-populated based off of those answers. And then more importantly, you could leverage some of your pre-existing content like Art just showed you. This doesn't have to be recreating the wheel from scratch. There's probably a lot of great content you could easily reuse. And finally, configure the document generation and storage capacity that you're looking for to meet both your corporation policies as well as any regulatory policies. We move to the next slide. So here's just a really quick example of how you can really mobilize your modernization effort by using templates. And what we do is, if you had to think about this from a visual aspect, we break all these current forms into chunks and really identify what the most repeatable areas are that could be reused and start creating a template for you to start thinking about that design going forward. And then as Art did a great job demonstrating, you can have the adaptability for all the different changes for, if you have a state requirement in one state, you could definitely be able to trigger that off somebody's entering their state, right? So creating that template is critical for actually moving towards the future design. So if we move to the next slide, I think Art's going to walk you through, okay, it's a great idea. We're getting there, right, Art?
Absolutely. And yeah, we threw this in just in case there's any technical people like me that aren't intimidated by some technology flow diagrams. But no, in the interest of time, I'll be brief on this. But the same way that you were talking, Marty, about categorizing, we also think about patterns. So, the first step is you want to optimize for the user experience, and whatever that technology is, in-house, out with a vendor. You want to say, okay, let's start by looking at the user experience. From our side, when we talk to clients, because they're usually they have got their strategy in place because they've worked with great partners to do so, we start saying, okay, in terms of the digital experience, what are the patterns? You might have a pattern, they may not seem obvious, but a pharmacy, an insurance company, and a bank all share a same pattern. I have a paper form, someone fills it out, they give it to me. So once you establish how that pattern is going to work in your execution of digitization, you can just repeat that. Then you're looking at what's the next pattern. Maybe we have some forms that need to go through and be integrated, or ones that have a two-step process. And so you start by optimizing the user experience of a pattern. You streamline for the workflow. So it might be adding in the checks that you need, or as we talked about before, adding other business information around the workflow. And then you think about, delivering the usable data. Our mantra has always been, the PDF, whatever it is, that's an output. It should not govern a user experience. So you build for what the experience can be, and then configure the workflow and the output to serve the business needs. That doesn't mean that the business needs aren't valid. It's just that they shouldn't be driving the user experience. Next slide. And the other thing that we always talk to clients about, and obviously we're biased, and I'll call that out. I can't help but do that, but it's empowering subject matter experts. Marty talked about it. I talked about it. Every project that we're in, we see it again and again. If a technology team is building from a silo, oh, I read the PDF, I know how the business process works, they're going to miss things. There is always more there. And so using something, low code, using subject matter experts as part of a review panel, finding ways to empower them to either consult in or ideally even develop the workflow themselves means that you'll be agile to adapt to changes. You'll understand the full context. And next slide. I think the last slide here is just, when we talk about integrating experiences across all channels, is that, as I said, the patterns are often the same. What you do for a flu shot vaccine may across a website, going into the pharmacy and how they do their reporting back to the government, but it's actually sharing some of the same patterns as what you'd see in group benefits in the self-service channel or in call center decision support. So when you start thinking about all these patterns from a technology perspective, it really lets you start accelerating streams of work and get to that ideal state that you want to get to faster. I think it's back to you to wrap up on time, I hope.
Yeah. And they said we went out of time. Oh,
I know.
Here. So we want to just put this last example in here. This is a simplified version of one of our blueprints, but we really want to show this to you to be able to take it home and really look at it. And, one of the key things we always run into clients is, they're overwhelmed with the number of forms they have and just feel that they don't know where to start. And, here's a simplified blueprint to really start how to take that inventory in by understanding what your categories are, understanding what divisions you have using that, and really getting a number of, how big is this problem we're going to tackle. So I encourage everyone to take one last look at this slide in your own convenience. So can you move to the next slide? Wow, Art. So look, we did end on time, and it's unbelievable that it ended so quick. But I say let's not let this party stop. So we want to connect with you. So we're off FormHero and Doculabs. They're offering a free 1-hour workshop to everyone on this call to really try to help your organization identify what pain points you're currently going through and offer some of our experience suggestions for your forms digitization strategy. So please look out for some communications over the next couple of days on how to schedule that workshop.
All right. Thanks so much, Marty and Art. That was great. We do have a number of questions to get to, and please do continue to ask away again by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. The first question we have for you, Marty, is what is the most common mistake companies make regarding their forms?
I mentioned this briefly before, but I think the first common mistake is really just doing a very siloed approach for just one use case, and not thinking about from a holistic strategy perspective for the whole organization. And that's everything from thinking about it from a technology position, overall business value. Art mentioned how does that impact the legal department and getting them involved early. So really taking a holistic approach for then, once you have that holistic approach put together, then you could scale it.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And Art, do you have any other thoughts on that question?
No, I think, the common mistakes are, number one, it's like most technology problems, it's not starting. Nothing's perfect. I'm a realist. As someone that's operating operator of a technology company. It's just you've got to try, and things aren't always perfect. If you only want to achieve perfection, you won't go anywhere. So that's the only kind of addition I'd say to that.
Okay, perfect. So moving on to the second question, Art, maybe you can start first. Is it possible to go totally paper-free, or is that an impossible vision?
I think it's a great aspiration. I don't know, there are some organizations that are 100% digital, and of course that's possible, but it's depending on the regulations in your industry, all those the things that may exist, it's not necessarily, you may not achieve 100%. And the question that I always ask clients is that the ultimate goal? Obviously there are reasons to want to be that, but when Marty's talking about potentially thousands of forms. So the first step is, can we improve the experience? Can we make this better to retain customers, to onboard customers? There's other times where, there are processes that just don't see a further ROI to eliminate that entirely, or there's brokers or other channels where it's still not necessarily going to be possible. So, in theory, is anything possible? Of course it is. But, we tend to take a pragmatic view and say, let's make meaningful change and drive towards that. And let's enable ourselves and our partners in the organizations to adapt to whatever the reality is today, because whatever you achieve today isn't probably going to be the end state for 10 years from now. So it's about having the flexibility to make meaningful change, make meaningful improvements. And of course you set a goal for yourself, but the value isn't in only when you get there, it's along the way.
Okay, great. And we've gone a little over time here. Thank you for all your interesting questions, but time to wrap up with one final question. So what are both of your stories around FormHero and Doculabs, and how did they start, if you don't mind?
Want to go first, Marty?
No, go ahead, Art, you go first.
So FormHero, the brief story is my partner, are the CEO of FormHero. We've always cared about data collection. I came from marketing, he came from healthcare decision support. And it's always been this idea of people trying to solve this problem and being burdened by technology, security requirements. So we set to build something from the ground up that would be secure, but built for enterprises to make that change. And the aha moment for him, it's not a happy story, but it's one of those life-changing moments where he was actually dealing with a sudden death of a loved one, a mother-in-law. And, he went to as part of the funeral process, they said, hey, we have a service where we'll interview you. about the deceased, and will, did they go to college? Oh, were they part of the alumni? Where did they shop often? And after they did this kind of casual interview, they'd send you a binder of hundreds and hundreds of pre-filled forms with little labels on it of here's where you sign off. And it's because you don't realize how much that drags on for you after someone is gone. And that was his aha moment, that like this was brilliant in terms of saving them in a problematic time in their lives. Who would want to wade through that paperwork? But he kind of was able to connect the dots and say, we could bring this to the enterprise and solve this problem, across all kinds of industries and make a meaningful impact in their businesses and in the lives of their clients. Sorry, Marty, I went with like the emotional one, and then I'm leaving you to
No, you're going to like a Oscar award for that one. Amazing. But no, I mean, if you look at Doculab's history over almost 30 years, just based in embedded in the name is the word doc, and that means documents. And really, we've been working with companies on how to help them, whether it's creating documents, storing documents, moving documents. It's really in our heritage of all of our consulting engagements, and really, obviously, the next step is going digital, and we've been helping a lot of clients do that.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, we actually do have one more quick question for both of you. How long is the average engagement? Are these in months or years? You both could quickly touch on that before we wrap up.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, it depends, right? But, to get a good set of, what your inventory is and really understand, what your roadmap's going to look like, it's really just a couple months to 3 months to kind of get that good inventory together, and then really try to put together a roadmap. And then from there, I could get to more of the technical specifics on how to move to digital, but it's really dependent on what the use case you really identify in the first phase.
Yeah, and for us, there's kind of two phases to that. We're a technology, a software company, so most of our engagements, obviously, are long term in terms of empowering the organization to own this digitalization themselves. We're not a consultancy. We'll do professional services, and often it's about setting a benchmark or so that the organization says, hey, here's how we do this well, and now we can build a center of excellence or build engage lines of business to do it. When we're engaged on projects, we tend to take it's usually like an 8-week duration of time, but that's not 8 weeks of consistent effort. It's usually a 2 to 4 week of actually building out an experience. But there's the evaluation phase. There's the UAT, user acceptance testing, and ultimately delivery. So you're looking at these. We break it always into that 8-week window, because at any 8-week period, you should have something that you can use live and that clients can be using, and that your team can be confident in. So around doing that, it's always about like, how fast can you be putting new things, getting real feedback, and adjusting. It's not a set and done. It's all about agility.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Art and Marty, for your time and expertise. And a huge thank you to all of you out there for joining us today. A final reminder that we're going to share this recording with you, and to look out for that in your inbox tomorrow. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.